I got a bone to pick with you, though, sir, over this book.
Okay. I kind of figured there was something along these lines that was coming.
Yeah, but we'll get there.
Okay. So other than the book, what's new in Mike's world?
Well, I had the second round of the humorous speech contest on Saturday. So the first round was the club. And the second round, I always get these terms mixed up. I think it's the area and then it's division, or it might be the other way around. But basically, I won the one on Saturday, which was the second round. So now I have to go to the next level up, which is in Green Bay in October. And then if I get past that one, I go to the district conference and compete there. That's basically, I think, the farthest you can go with the humorous speech contest. So it's going really well, but it's also pushing me way outside my comfort zone. I'm not a funny guy, but I'm learning I can become one.
Well, congratulations for one. I saw the picture of your trophy on Instagram. I was very proud. I was very happy for you.
Thank you. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do because, like I said, I've never really considered myself a funny guy because I've never been very loud or outgoing, or I don't know, my personality just, despite what you may think from listening to a podcast, isn't like look at me type of person. And so when you are competing in a humorous speech contest, you are saying, look at me, I'm going to entertain you and I'm going to be funny. Like that's a pretty big boast for me. And it's really stressful to have to back that up. But at least for the first round, or first and second round now, I've done it.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
I think this is a very common misconception because I think my view of a funny person per the stereotype you just laid out is very different because I tend to think of people who are clever with words and can lay out like the facial expressions and the emotion that goes with them. I think of that as very funny. I will not disagree with you that typically that comes in a loud, boisterous package, but I don't think it needs to be that per se. I think my wife would agree with you because she's very picky in what she finds humorous, and it has to be a very clever play on words in a lot of cases to get her to laugh. And if you can do that, it's really entertaining because she has a hard time stopping laughing.
That's funny. Also, something super cool that happened actually just yesterday. I'm going to send you a picture that somebody else took, not my wife. So the picture's not the greatest, but let me know when you get that link and you get that picture down. I'll explain what's going on there.
Okay, loading. I see a picture of a dude playing guitar in front of a microphone. I see another dude in the background playing what looks to be a violin, and that dude in the background appears to be you, sir.
Yeah, so that's me, and the other dude in this picture, the guy sitting at the piano, is Phil Driscoll, Grammy Award-winning, played for 5 presidents, like really, really awesome musician. So he came to our church, and I got to jam with him, which was super cool.
That is sweet. That is really cool.
It was awesome.
Well done. He looks like he's very comfortable. He knows exactly what he's doing.
He is the stereotypical
he's been on the stage a few
cool
times.
musician. Yeah, but what I like about him is he's very authentic. It's not fake. He's not too cool for school. Like he'll sit there and talk to you and chat about stuff. Like he's very approachable. He's just very real. And it was a blast playing with him.
That's cool. That's cool. When was this? This was past Sunday?
Yeah, as we're recording this, it was literally yesterday.
Nice. So you're still flying high on this one.
Yep.
Cool. Well, you've been busy. Wow. Go Mike. You've been all over the place then.
It kind of ties into my my action items. So you want me to go first?
Yes.
All right. So my first action item, which you put on here, and I don't know how you're going to hold me accountable to this unless I just keep doing awesome stuff.
That's most of them. It's kind of lame. It's how it goes.
Yeah, but it was dream bigger, don't compromise the vision. So, yeah, and these specific things that I just shared with you, and now the rest of the internet, since this is going to be published, these aren't directly correlated to like a professional goal or a 12-week year or anything like that. But it is, I think, still in line with this action item where if I am learning to dream bigger and not compromise, then I don't have to think to myself like, oh, that'd be really awesome if I could jam with Phil Driscoll, but it'll never happen. It did happen. So that's super
yesterday
cool.
To be.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's more just taking that mindset to the rest of my goals and the rest of my life. I guess, the follow-up from last time is that there is some cool stuff happening, and it's stuff that I wouldn't have identified as like, yeah, I'm going to try and make this happen. So it's cool to see that there's, I guess it's kind of like validation for the concept.
So are you, yeah, it does. And are you continuing to push even further? Like my concern there is that you would eventually find a place to be, not necessarily, I don't want to say complacent, but comfortable, I guess would be the better term.
Yeah. I guess, that time will tell in terms of whether that is the case. I could see that too. I can tell you that for the time being, I have no problem thinking of other cool stuff that I want to do someday that it would be cool if I ever got there, and I don't really know how I would ever get there.
Really big bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of gets into some of these other action items. But another thing just right now, I guess this is kind of both personal and professional. I really want to get a book deal, like a legit book deal, not publishing it yourself on Amazon, like major publisher book deal. And I've had somebody kind of make some introductions and get me rolling in that direction, which is super cool. But I guess like that's the next thing that's like, this is way too big for Mike to do. So he's going to need some help from God, the universe, whatever your religious belief system. I'm going to say specifically, since we threw it out there in the Monk and the Merchant, I really believe that by me embracing this mindset, that God is opening some doors for me that it's just like I never even thought to look there before.
Which is always exciting and terrifying.
Yep, exactly.
So do we get to know what the book concept is, or are you keeping that close to your chest at the moment?
Well, so I had a conversation with a New York Times bestselling author. That's all I can really say for now, publicly anyways.
Okay.
And
all right.
They told
I see how
me
it goes.
that my book was kind of the right thing at the right time for some major Christian book publishers like Thomas Nelson and Tyndale. They basically told me, oh, you need to talk to these two people specific, or these two publishers specifically. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know, but I can't get in there. Like they don't even accept submissions. Like it's not even a fact of like, well, you're going to throw it out there and there's thousands that they have to comb through. They literally do not even take them unless you know somebody. And this person said that, well, yeah, you got to talk to this person at Tyndale and this person at Thomas Nelson. Don't worry, I'll make the introduction. So,
okay.
But basically what he told me was that the theme of the book that I had currently was pretty good. And he thought that they would want to kind of reclaim the term hustle from the Gary V's and the Grant Cardones of the world, which I thought was kind of funny because I do have like a different definition of it where it's not just doing more things, it's doing the right things. And that's another bookworm episode maybe on on my book. So I won't get into all of it here. But basically, he said that
I feel like we need to do like Bookworm After Dark series.
There we go. B-sides.
We get to just talk about whatever.
Yep. So I've been taking a lot of notes and writing down a lot of things as I've continued to research the topic. And I've got a whole bunch of stuff that actually I've wanted to implement into an update, but also with the stuff going on with potentially a book deal, like I'm not going to rush that out the door now. And then, basically if they're going to republish it, quote unquote, like there's a bunch of stuff that I would add, but I would want to work with an editor in order to revise it before I actually go through all the work of adding it, if that makes sense.
It does.
So it would be like a version 2. It would be essentially a new book because there's so much that's changed. But the topic and the title, feedback I've gotten is that it's really good, and it's just the sort of thing that Christian publishers specifically would be looking for. So we'll see.
This is really cool. I like this. I like that you're kind of telling the world about this on a Bookworm episode. That's kind of cool.
Well, that leads into the third action item here, kind of, writing out my statement and normalizing the dream.
I'm making this real easy for you today.
Well, this one, honestly, I almost deleted this off the list because I'm really nervous saying this, because this is specifically from Think and Grow Rich. This is Napoleon Hill's. Basically, it's a definition of the income that you want to have. So this is going to sound, I don't know. Some people may be turned off.
You can bleep out the stuff yourself if you want that you don't want to share.
I don't care. I mean, if I had not gone through Sean McCabe's book and heard him say that Sean West is going to be $1 billion brand by whatever year he said, I would feel a little bit more uneasy about this. But, the fact that he's done it, when he did that, I really respected it. So you may really respect this. You may think I am off my rocker. You may think I'm conceited, whatever. But this is what I got from Think and Grow Rich, because I talked to my wife about this too. So,
okay,
as of recording right now, you can leave this in. But my statement, normalizing the dream, is I will be a multimillionaire by the time I am 40 years old. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am right now, but I did just have a birthday. So you can do the math yourself.
Okay. Fair enough. I like it. So this means that you have the goal, which then leads into you have to lay out the actual action items that make that happen, which I guess plays back into your number one of dream bigger pretty well.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And then that goes into the book deal. Yeah, I could see you're kind of getting pieces put together for that.
Yeah, so the book deal, the thing that makes me nervous about the book deal specifically is that this is completely out of my hands. I am completely relying on the kindness of somebody I have never met other than on Skype.
So it was a good time to read the book for today.
Yeah, actually it was. But we'll get to that. Following the Think and Grow Rich formula, though, really the statement, this specific action item, it's kind of, tying all of this productivity and bookworm stuff together, like Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. This is where you want to be. And then Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich would say that once you know where you want to be, then you'll start to see the strategies that you can take to get there. So yeah, the book deal is a potential strategy that could help me get to that point. But again, it makes me nervous because it is 100% completely outside of my control. Yes, I wrote the book that the person looked at, and I've got something to send to the publishers, but I'm completely relying on him to make the introductions. Otherwise, this goes nowhere.
Yeah, and I guess then the question becomes, if they say no, then what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know. Become so good they can't ignore you.
So hard.
Keep winning humorous speech contests.
Build the brand. Keep writing. Yep, that's how it goes.
I one of the reasons that I entered the humorous speech contest, actually the main reason that I entered the humorous speech contest, is that when I competed in the inspirational contest last fall at the area level, the third level, I completely blanked on my speech. I was going great, and then all of a sudden, just nothing, silence for 15 seconds, which obviously meant that I did not move on to the next round.
Right.
But
right.
I've never had that sort of thing happen to me before. And when it happened, I was crushed. I could not believe that I did that. I mean, I was speaking on a topic that I literally wrote a book about. So how stupid does it look if I'm up there with nothing to say? But it happened. And so I said to myself, basically, the next opportunity that I got, I was going to prove to myself that that's not normal, that basically I could fix it the next time around. And that's kind of what happened with the first round anyways of this humorous speech contest. So it has nothing to do with me figuring out how to be funny or the humor. It's just the next opportunity to compete and prove to myself that I can actually do this.
Fair enough. You have some big stuff going there. but
I do.
You have one more follow-up item here. How's the personal communication room? How's that going?
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to be able to hold me accountable to this in the near future. I mean, basically, I have the plan to finish off a room in our basement, which will eventually become my office. But that is not something that's happening in the next couple weeks anyways. And so I would hope that we'd be able to do that by the end of the year. And if that happens, that's going to become my personal communication room. But I don't really see how it works until we finish that space.
Okay, for this space, what is it that needs done? Is it like studs and you need to put up sheetrock and mud it and paint it and everything, or is it?
We've got it framed. It needs electrical and it needs drywall, and I want it to. I just don't want to do it. I want somebody else to do it. I want to pay somebody to do it. 'Cause I don't have time for that, and I'm not good at it either. Maybe if we were closer, I'd pay you to come help me out.
Well, that's what I'm sitting here thinking. Like, do I need to come over there for a week and we just do this, or what?
Maybe. I mean, baby's due in a couple of weeks, so I'll be home for a while. You know, if you want to come work from Appleton, that's
right.
Cool.
This is gonna go well. Okay, Rachel, you take care of the baby. We're gonna go make a whole bunch of noise downstairs.
Yeah. No, I've talked to a couple of people about estimates and things. I've got the estimates down. Maybe that's one of my next 12-week year goals. You know, like you had the financial goal related to the car. Maybe mine is related to the office. Where like it's not done unless that sort of thing happens. I think it's not going to be a whole lot longer until we're going to be able to do it. But I'm not going to go out and spend a bunch of money right before we have a kid. So, yeah, it's on hold for now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll bring it up every time we record just to rub salt in the wound.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
I guess that means I have to go now.
Your turn. Yep.
All right. So first one on this list, change my morning and evening self-talk. So this one's not going so great. I think I did really good for about 4 days after we last recorded, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure I could tell much difference. Now, granted, it takes much longer than 4 days for that to really have the effect that it should, because the goal there is to start dreaming much bigger and get the motivation to go. Now, I will say that I have been better about the second piece of this, which is visualize the day ahead of time. I've been a lot better about that. I completely screwed up all of my OmniFocus context and redid it to make this easier. And yeah, that deserves an article or something by itself. That's way too big to even mention here, really. But the thing it helps me do is figure out what does the day look like and what is my plan for the day, and actually decide when things are going to happen mentally. I don't have to write them down per se, but just knowing what the plan is helps me a lot. But the whole self-talk thing, yeah, that one, I'm going to leave it on the list for next time. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
So the visualizing thing, that's been going well. I've been trying to keep that piece going because that is helpful. The last one I've got here, take advantage of location shifting. And I talked about this a little bit, where I tend to jump from place to place, both in my office and where I'm working throughout town, it seems. And I've got at least one more client in town that I've been doing a website for, so it's kind of fun. I can go over to her shop and do some things from time to time. So I've been trying to make sure I move around a little bit more. But one of the things I've specifically tried to do is I have a whiteboard here in my office. I suppose you've never been in my office yet, Mike.
I have not.
You need to come over and we'll hang out. But
all right, we'll be productive.
I'll come over. We'll build your communication room, and then you can come over here and we'll sit around and dream stuff on a whiteboard.
There we go, and eat Josh's bacon.
Yes, and we'll invite Josh over. You should just come over tomorrow for the Apple event. There you go. People know when we're recording this now.
I might get there in time.
There you go. So the location shifting thing, I've been trying to do that more. And I go up and I do things on the whiteboard, then I'll go over to my desk, then I'll go over to the couch, like that sort of thing. And I tend to move around a little bit. And it's been helping me get a few more things done in a day, which is helpful. But at the same time, I also know the whole cyclical thing of go work, take a break, go work, take a break. So I'm trying to get some of that balanced out at the same time. All these little tools and tricks.
Life hacks. Although I hate that term.
I know.
I like the idea of location shifting, though. I think that if you have the space to do that within the place that you live, that's ideal. I really, really don't, but I implement that basically by hopping around from different places. And we've talked about this on Bookworm before, where just the process of getting in the car and driving somewhere else is enough to kind of reset and then enter into a new mental state where, okay, now I can actually get done what I need to get done.
Yes. That's actually one reason I've debated adding like a 1 day a week going to, there's a Caribou Coffee not far from where we live. To be honest, it's about 1.5 miles, if that. It takes like 10 minutes to get there, but that's the nature of a city or a town. But I've really debated spending one morning there a week and doing a bunch of writing, because that's an area where I want to spend some more time. Again, I've kind of fallen off that bandwagon, but I want to get back into it. So I've really thought about doing that. It'd be a good way to take advantage even more of location shifting.
How about like a co-working space? Are there any that are close to where you live?
I don't know of any in our town at all, but I also haven't spent a lot of time looking for them. But it's something I probably should look into, but I haven't. But some of the reason I haven't is because I work at the church. So it kind of acts as a co-working space because it's definitely an office. My desk is right inside the main office door, so you can't go anywhere in the office area without passing my desk. So I'm usually not at my desk because of that.
I was going to say, therein lies the problem.
I know. So I end up all over the building doing things in a lot of different places. But it kind of acts as a co-working space for me, because it's not uncommon for me to go finish things up at the church and then continue working on my own stuff, just get off the clock or whatever you want to call it. That's not uncommon for me to do.
That makes sense if you need just like a place to if you need to find a quiet corner somewhere and work on something. But what I have grown to like about the co-working space is, like, I'm recording this in my office. There are a couple people who are in the shared space right outside my office. When I get done with this recording and I need like just something to location shifting, if I need to kind of reset, I can go out there, talk to people for a couple minutes, people who are of the same mindset and who are doing cool things. And then I can come back in, re-energized and ready to work again, as opposed to having to maintain that motivation in seclusion. Like, that's the hard part for me.
Yeah, I totally get that. The whole brainstorming thing tends to be a big motivator, which is why a lot of times whenever I get done recording a podcast, I can go crank out some really cool stuff. This is another reason I like keeping all of my podcasts around, because it serves as a self-motivator of sorts.
Nice.
Great fun. You want to jump into our book? I'm interested in what your beef with me on this one is. So I'll introduce it first. So the book for today, The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And I'm trying to remember where I first heard of this. I think the first time I was introduced to Amanda Palmer was through her TED Talk. Did you get a chance to go watch this?
I was too scared to watch the TED Talk after reading this book, to be honest.
That's a very fair point. I do not discredit that whatsoever. I will say that the TED Talk is very tame compared to the productions and entertainment stuff she talks about in the book. And I in no way would have guessed her normal way of entertaining after having watched the TED Talk. So it was only after I looked her up post TED Talk that I realized she's a little bit crazy for me, but
she's a whole lot of crazy, which is okay. I mean, everybody's their own form of crazy, but since you asked the things that I did not like about this book, well, first of all, right. I can deal with swearing. Josh has brought up, like, how could I possibly like Grant Cardone's book because there's swearing in that? Well, this is Grant Cardone times about 1,000. And I tried
to warn you on this.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. Not all language is the same, at least to me. And so a lot of times I felt that Amanda Palmer fit the stereotype of I'm using swear words because I can't think of something else to say. And I know that a lot of that is the culture that she is in. But I honestly, like almost every single time she used a swear word, I was like, what? You got to be kidding me. Seriously? Like, it wasn't even for shock value. It's just, there's one time where I was like, oh, that's a creative use of that. But every other time I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is just like out of nowhere and you're throwing it out there just because that's who you are. You're this raw, emotional musician. And I'm just like, no, I'm not interested at all in what you have to say. Coupled with the other thing here is the complete irreverence for religion. Okay. Now, I don't care if you don't agree with me, but you don't have to slam my belief system, which is directly what she's doing. She made direct comparisons between the church and the sin eater and the savior and all of this type of stuff. And I'm sitting there going, that's not what that means at all. Like, you're taking this completely out of context. And I know that I'm different because I've got a Bible college degree. So not everybody's going to have the same perspective as I do. But you cannot just flippantly attack people's personal belief systems and expect to have an authentic dialogue, which is what she's after. So those couple things, like right at the beginning, I had a really hard time getting through this one. In fact, I bought this on audiobook so that I could listen to it when I went for my longer runs, which I'm now up to over 10 miles. So I just let it go. And whenever she said something that I wanted to jot down, which was few and far between, I would use drafts on my Apple Watch to capture it. But otherwise, I just I got to get through this. I got to get through this.
I'm glad I could push you a little bit. I can tell this definitely struck a chord with you.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I actually have in my outline here, I hated this book, !
And yet you have takeaways.
I do have takeaways.
We'll wait on those, but all right, it's fun to get you fired up again. So I don't think I had near the guttural reaction to this that you did. And I think that's partially because I've dealt with, I don't want to say a lot of people that work in this industry, as much as I've just worked with people that are, as we would say in Christian circles, very broken. And it's a sector that I tend to try to understand. And I know that I can't fully understand because I completely understand what you're saying. Like, what on earth are you thinking? That's not the way it is. That's not what that means. I'm totally with you there. But at the same time, she's not trying to understand that. It's just her understanding and the way that she was brought up to see something or was taught. So she doesn't know any better on some of that. And I try to relate to that. It was very hard in this case, to be honest with you. But there are some things that I thought were positive in here. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, Mike.
There's definitely some positive things in what she had to say, but to me, it was extremely difficult to connect with anything, which that's the whole point of the book. Is she was talking about making these connections and showing people love, and I'm just like, okay, it comes back to how most people, and I believe I'm justified in saying the word most. I know that's a generalization, but I know a whole lot of people who, if they don't understand the real Christian belief system, they'll look at the Westboro Baptist and they'll be like, you guys are so intolerant. And what that does is they create this picture in their heads of like Christians are intolerant. And so that's the attitude that they project as soon as they have an interaction with me. And I'm like, I'm the one that's intolerant, but I can hear from your voice that you're intolerant of just the fact that I even have this belief system. Like, what is wrong with this picture? And that's the thing that just like from the very onset, I was like, okay, we're not going to agree on just about anything here. Why even have the conversation? Because you can tell that the other person is coming from their perspective, which is so set and they're so enlightened that it's like everything that you say is going to be wrong. Oh, you're so close-minded. What do you do in that position? Like, that's what's really frustrating to me is she's talking about all the religion stuff and the sin eaters, and then she's talking about like, do you love me? And obviously, like, love is a really important theme, and it's something that if she just talked about that, like, we could have a conversation about that, we could find agreement on that. But when she's talking about like, oh, you can't experience love until you've slept with all these other guys, and that's not exactly what she's saying, but she's like telling all of this all of her experiences as creditation for her perspective and her narrow view of something that she doesn't understand. That's the thing that drove me nuts. It's like, well, this was my experience. Well, that's fine. You can experience something. Doesn't mean that it's right. Like, you can believe something, and I don't want to make this like right religious belief systems or anything like that, but you can believe something and it can be wrong. I have held many wrong beliefs over the years. And the fact that I thought something once doesn't mean that's justification for that point of view.
So I don't know that I don't think I took the whole religion thing nearly as far as you did, because I think she has her own views on it for sure, and I understand where that was laid out very early, and to me it seemed to stop there. And then I was trying to, because part of the reason I picked this book, which I'm sure you're completely confounded by, like, what on earth is Joe doing? So part of the reason I picked this book is because listening to Amanda Palmer talk during her TED Talk, giving that speech, giving that, yeah, I'll call it a talk. As she's giving that, I was struck by how, I don't want to say enlightened, but how much she comprehended the inner workings and the depth of human connection. She's very good at that. That's something that Amanda is excellent at, is connecting with and helping people. And seeing that even in her TED Talk, and then knowing that she had written this book about asking, one, I didn't realize it was a story of her life. I did not realize that until I started reading it. I was like, oh, she's just going to give us basically a memoir of how she got to where she is today and asking people for things. And that's something that I know I personally struggle with. I tend to be of the sort where I want to do it on my own. I can take care of this. I don't need to ask for help because I'll figure it out. Like, even take my business, I tend to say yes to things and not ask for help. I'll go figure it out on my own. like, oh, sure, I'll take that project. Do you know how to do that? You know how to write in the Go language? Nope, but I'll figure it out. I'm not going to ask anybody. I'll figure it out. Like, that's just the way that I tend to work. And I know that that's not necessarily detrimental, but it's also not incredibly healthy. So knowing that she's been through a lot, and knowing that she has a lot of experience with connecting with people and allowing people to help her, that's what drew me to the book. I was mostly interested in what her take on that was. Again, not realizing it was a story of her life, but it is a very interesting story. I will tell you that. I thought it was an interesting story. I do not agree with most of her life decisions, but it at least shows, if you can look past some of the bad decision making that was going there, and that's, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it relative. It depends on your worldview and how you see things, but I was able to see a lot of the inner workings of her intent and how she wanted to connect with people, which is where some of our action items come in that we'll get into later. But she's very good at seeing where other people are and seeing ways to help them and trying to figure out how to connect with them to help in that way. That was the positive side of it that I saw.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. The issue here for me is that the audiobook is 11 hours and 27 minutes, and there are probably about 18 minutes worth of bookworm type material, basically her TED Talk, where she shares the takeaways. Okay, the rest of it is all about, well, I mean, I'm not gonna get into the specifics, but most of the details, I was like, why are you telling me this? And maybe that is the lens that I approach the book from, not as a biography, but as, you know, a productivity quote unquote type book, where it's like, what can I learn from this? But yeah, it just left me with a very bad taste in my mouth. And literally every time I would listen to it, I'm like, I got to go take a shower now. This is ridiculous.
That's very fair. That's very fair. But alas, you still had a talking point you want to talk about. That was the fraud police.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I thought was best in terms of the outline here. There are a couple other things. Like she makes some really good points. That's the thing. If I wasn't so turned off by, and it's not even just her oversharing, it is the attitude with which she shares. And I don't know how to describe it any better than that. But
so on the audiobook, is she the one that reads it?
Yep.
Okay,
yeah,
so you got to listen to her herself. Okay.
Yep. And you can tell the points when I like listening to books that are narrated by the author, because you can tell when they are very connected to the material that they are sharing versus, something that their editor told them to put in. And I could definitely hear the emotion every time she swore. But so in this case, it was a bad thing, at least for me, because it's just like, I'm waiting for the next opportunity. I'm going to sound, basically it kind of read to me like a poem, and she would set up the opportunities for her to swear is kind of the way that it appeared to me. And every time it happened, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, why? And again, maybe it's just the perspective and the lens that I had going into it, where I was like, if the goal here is to share the message about how you need to make yourself vulnerable and ask for things, you're alienating a whole bunch of people by sharing a whole bunch of things that really aren't that necessary. And I don't think all those details were necessary. I think some of the stuff was really cool, and it gave a perspective. Like she talks about her experience as she would get dressed up, and she would as a bride, and she would stand on that milk crate and she'd be silent. People would come and they'd throw $1 in her hat, and then she'd give them a flower. Like that part I thought was actually kind of cool. But after you get past that part, and after you get past the what do they call it? Cloud City or whatever. Like there's a lot of stuff where it's just Cloud Club. Yeah, that's what it was. Like a lot of it is just, it felt on the audiobook version anyways, like rehashed or retold or telling the same stories through a different perspective. I'm sure they're like slightly different, but it's like new opportunities to swear. And I'm just like, I could not connect to it for any length of time because of that. Because even while I was out for a run, like I would have the urge while running to be like, why am I listening? Why am I listening to this? It felt like, so you've got like, if you're in terms of reading material, you've got traditionally people have viewed like nonfiction books as like the meat. This is the stuff that you have to read because it's going to make you a better person. And that's kind of the goal, I would argue, of Bookworm. And then you've got the stuff that is just pure entertainment. Sometimes that's fiction, although in this case, I would say it's almost like the tabloids. It's the really sensational stuff, because that was totally her goal with the way that she told a lot of these stories, that she wanted to make it so sensational, so shocking that like she jolted you from the page and were paying attention to what she was saying. And I guess maybe the audiobook that came across even more, But anyway, so yeah, Fraud Police.
This is kind of entertaining. I really got you fired up this time. So
you did.
This is probably inadvertently. When do you do your running? Do you do your running in the morning?
Usually in the morning, except on Saturdays when I go for my longer runs. I usually do that a little bit later. So late morning, early afternoon.
So you were listening to this in the morning, which meant that you were starting your day with a very negative jumping off point. So I may have wrecked your days because of this.
Well, I don't think you wrecked any of my days, though. I guess my wife would be able to tell you for sure. But
okay. All right, Rachel, send me an email.
Yeah. So anyways, Fraud Police. So the idea here.
Okay.
The idea, because I want to stop harping on the negatives of this book and try to find something positive.
All right, I'm good with that.
So Fraud Police, this is her term for all of the people who are going to tell you that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. And this is a really, really cool idea. Like the whole mental picture of like, there's an organization that there's an association of people who are literally out there to stop you from doing things that you are unqualified to do, even if this whole thing just plays out in your head. Like any person who's creative can totally relate to that. And I know that I've been there. In fact, my humorous speech contest, I talk about how I'm a quote unquote productivity expert. And then I talk about how I hate that term because I didn't go to school for this. I don't have a degree from Productivity University. I don't have any certifications from any big name organizer gurus. And like I wrap up my opening statement by saying, I'm a productivity poser. This isn't something that like I decided I'm going to make this my life's work. I kind of stumbled into this. And I'm sure you probably can relate to some degree in the stuff that you do too, Joe, where it's like, I don't have the right to do this sort of thing. But yes, you do. No one has to give you permission to do that cool thing that you have that, and I would say the word anointing, the gift that you have inside of you, like that has to come out. And there's no fraud police. There's no organization that is going to sign off on that once you've reached a certain level of mastery. Like you have every right just to do it. And then if people hate it, if there's trolls, whatever, like you don't have to listen to them. All you have to do is be authentic, be who you really are, and get the stuff out that is already inside of you.
So when I started doing custom development, I had to come to grips with the fact that I had no training in development or computer science at all. And I was relying on my own self-learning process to do what I do. And I charged very low rates in comparison to where I'm at now. And it was because I felt like a complete phony. It's like, okay, I'm going to go do development work. I'm going to be a coder. I don't really know what I'm doing. Like this is all fake. Like, I don't really know what I should be doing. How does this work? It was very disheartening, I guess, would be the right term for that, because it's not something that I felt like I should be doing. Like you're talking about the productivity space. I'm a phony. Like I work in the productivity space as well. And people think I have my act together. People assume, well, he writes and he does all this stuff and he's always got the scripts and he's got OmniFocus all put together. It's like, you realize that the reason that all of that is there is because I can't get my act together, right? Like you know that the reason I try to do this stuff is because I can't handle it without that. My wife is the complete opposite. She's very disciplined. She doesn't understand productivity at all. She's like, it's just things that you have to get done. Just do it. Like, what's the big deal? Just do it. Like, just go. Like, what? She doesn't understand. But she has a very high level of self-discipline and ability to get a lot of stuff done in a short amount of time. So she's just naturally falling into that stuff. So she does a lot of the productivity stuff. She just doesn't realize it. She's doing it. Whereas I think you and I tend to struggle with it more. So we have to put more systems in place.
Well, I think that if you are going to say that, yes, this is who I am, like you'll never be able to feel, unless you were to devote every single waking moment towards the mastery of whatever subject, it's hard to say, yes, I am this. So for example, I know when we were at Macstock, you were having trouble embracing the term discourse expert, probably because you're not in discourse all the time. But the truth of the matter is, you're pretty dang good at discourse to the point where some of the stuff that you shared with me, like the team has reached out to you and your code is included in some plugins that have been used a gazillion times. Like that makes you an expert. But still in your head, you feel like the fraud police are breathing down your neck and be like, well, you when's the last time you looked at discourse? Oh, it's been 2 weeks. So much has changed since you were in there last. Like you don't know anything anymore. Like that's very real.
Yeah, the number of times that I go, this is almost embarrassing to say, the number of times that I go upgrade discourse, I'm like, wait, what's that? Like, what's that feature? What's that button do? I've never seen that before. What is that? Like, oh, right, you're an expert, right? You're supposed to know all this stuff. Here we go again. It's like, but the thing is, you have to, and Amanda fights the fraud police in her mind pretty much the whole book. Like, even though like she did $1 million Kickstarter campaign, the first time ever that's been done in a music world, and completely has been changing a lot of how the music industry works to an extent because of the way that she's doing things. And yet she still feels like a fake. So it's like, okay, here's the thing. When it comes to art, when it comes to creativity, and I would tell you that development is a very creative field to work in, very different than coding. I make the big difference between development and coding. So stick with me there. That's a rant for another day. So development I see as very creative. You're trying to solve problems. You're trying to figure out how to make things work. You have to be very artistic in how you make that happen. And it's not a simple process. So there's always this little bug in the back of your mind, just waiting to say, that's not it. You're wrong. You're a fake. They're going to see you now. Like that thing's always there. I hate that thing. I want to squish the bug.
You know what the most effective, and this is something that Amanda really has hit on with this book, and probably is the reason that she shared all the stuff that I had issues with. Like the reason to overcome, or the way to overcome that though, is just to share who you really are, and not to pretend, not to hold back when it comes to this is who I am. But I think the thing that really turned me off was the almost the force feeding of that stuff. Like if I want to know about your background, yes, like don't hide anything, let me know. But I really don't need to know everything that happens in the back rooms at events and all that stuff. And honestly, like I can't even think of a specific thing anymore, because after a while, like I just tuned it all out. But
like all the stories, like you just tune them all out.
Not all of the stories. I know, like she talked about her friend Anthony and how he was going through cancer and stuff like that. The stuff with her husband, Neil, I believe his name was. I actually finished this book a couple weeks ago, so it's
I'm the slacker here.
And it's it was the audiobook version, so I didn't write down all of the details of all that stuff, and I'm having a little bit of a hard time going back now and recalling the specific stuff I didn't like. But I guess my point of making husband, this Neil Gaiman. My point of making this specific famous comment author, though, is a little bit of justification for the approach that I found so appalling. The fact that I'm sure that is the reason behind that, is that she does not want to appear to be a phony. She wants to overcome the fraud police. And so she's just going to share, like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And I think that approach is effective, but I also think that you can do it a lot more tactfully than she did. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Yes. But one thing I think, I'm going to transition a little bit here, because I think a lot of us know we've dealt with this whole imposter syndrome. Like we're very familiar with that, which is what she's talking about. And it's something that a lot of, if not all of us, fight in some form or another. I think she even calls that out. Everybody fights the fraud police in some form or another. Mm-hmm. But despite all of that, and she's very brutally honest, and she shares way more than I think she should. But that's the point, is she's trying to be authentic. She's trying to be real. She wants you to see her. And I think that's one of the reasons that she loves connecting with people so much. And she does this in a lot of ways, primarily online. But the part that was interesting to me, because so much of, you get into these tech conversations and how is technology changing the way that we connect with people, it seems like there's a lot of detrimental things that come from online relationships, whether it's friends, whether it's a intimate relationship, it doesn't matter. It's very detrimental to only have online relationships, which is why people tend to recommend, meet people in person, connect in person, blah, 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 blah. You guys get the story. The part that struck me was that Amanda is very good about using the online space as a jumping off point to get to the in-person relationships. And
totally,
she's kind of a professional at that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say she's an expert at that. she's very good at using primarily Twitter and her blog to start conversations that are very difficult and then follows them up with personalized conversations. Not everyone gets a response, but if something strikes her, she'll respond personally to them. She tries to share other people's work as much as she can because she wants to help people. She's awesome at that. But I thought it was very interesting that she uses these tools as ways to create in-person contact. So I don't know many people that do it that way. They tend to think of it as one or the other. I'm going to be at a conference, so I'll meet with people then. But you're going to just do the online thing up until that point, not just throw something together last minute. Whereas that's exactly what she does. She does these, what she calls ninja shows.
Yep, ninja
she
gigs.
throws something together day of or a day before and does something very random. So I don't know. I thought she was very good at that.
I so want to do that sometime. It's probably not going to work with my 140 followers or whatever I have, but
right. I thought of that. It's like, okay, well, the only reason this really works for you is you have millions of followers.
Yep.
So you can put a tweet out saying, I'm going to be in Times Square in 2 hours, and there will be a couple hundred people that show up. Like, well, that's more than a lot of people have for followers. So it just doesn't add up.
Yeah. Now, the reason that she's been able to get it to that point, and kind of specifically to the point that you just made, was one of the things I jotted down. She said that fame doesn't buy reach, connection does. And so if you're able to provide a real connection to a small group of people, then that base that you have will grow. At least that's my personal belief. So it doesn't really matter how many people you're connected with at the beginning. Like, really the takeaway here is that whether you've got 10 people or 10,000 people who you're quote unquote connected with, do you really have a connection with each one of those people? And that's the thing that she really values. And she'll reply to every single blog comment and she'll reply to every single email. I thought it was interesting that she actually created an email newsletter in 2001. So that's 16 years ago.
That's a huge list by now.
Yeah, and she was kind of like one of the first people, it sounds like, to really embrace the whole idea of email marketing as an artist. Like, that's kind of interesting to me. But I think it's just the approach that she's looking for the ways to make those connections, and so she sees the tools not as a way of selling more records, obviously, but just making more authentic connections with people. And I think that's completely noble. I can completely relate to that belief. Like, I'm 100% in agreement with that. And you said specifically that she wants to be seen. Another really, really great point, related point that she made. She mentioned the Joshua Bell experiment. I was actually familiar with this. Do you know who Joshua Bell is?
No, I don't know. I don't even remember that name being in there. I think I know the experiment you're talking about, but I don't recall him.
She maybe didn't even use the term Joshua Bell. She mentioned a world famous violinist. I just shared a link with you.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
So I'm a violin nerd, and I know who Joshua Bell is. And I had heard of this when he did it. The article that she referenced is this experiment that was done where Joshua Bell, who is literally a world-class violinist, people pay hundreds, thousands of dollars to go see him in concert. He dressed down and went to the subway, opened up his violin case, and started playing. And there were only a handful of people who even recognized him. There was one person who actually recognized who he was, I think, is what the article said. But I didn't really read the whole thing. But most people just walked right on by because they're so consumed with their commute and heading to a job that they dread. Like, they didn't even notice the gift that was in front of them. And I think she used this kind of as a justification or an intro into the thing that she was doing with the bride, which I thought was cool. I thought that the point from that whole section of the book where it's like most people aren't even going to notice you, like that's really sad. And that leads into one of my action items, not trying to get out of the content of the book. I think there's still a bunch more here that we could discuss. But one of my action items that I wrote down was have at least, I forgot to put a number in there, at least one conversation where the only goal is to listen and understand what the other person is feeling. So it's not, okay, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to listen to you, but at the end of this, we're going to have like a plan to move forward. Like literally there is no plan other than just listen. And so the obvious place that I could start with this would be with my wife, but I don't think that's too, I don't want to say that's too easy, but it's not. I want something that I would have to work a little bit harder for. Like I live in the same house as my wife, where literally if I am paying more attention, nothing else needs to change in order for that to happen. But I want to be able to have this sort of impact, not just with my family members, but with other people too. So I'm going to kind of more broadly or more narrowly define this as one other conversation where the only goal is to listen or understand what the person is feeling who is outside of my normal sphere of influence, if that makes sense. So somebody that I'd have to go to a specific place in order to see. So this is inspired by the whole experiment that she did where she would set up and she'd stand in the bride costume and people would just walk on by. Like, I don't want to just walk on by. I want to be one of the people who notices these things and notices the people and can even see, like, if they're hurting, like you can tell that in their eyes if you pay attention enough to see it. So that's what I'm going for.
Literally 2 hours ago, I was sitting down for lunch. My wife, as soon as we got sat down, she's, okay, I have a dilemma. And she's getting ready to lead into what this dilemma is. And I stopped her quickly. I was like, okay, is this a problem-solving dilemma? Like, you want my feedback? Or is this a listen dilemma where I just need to acknowledge that this is a thing that's going on? Like, what are you expecting from me right here? So in that particular case, it was a problem-solving dilemma. But this is a question that I ask her. I don't know. There's probably usually at least one conversation a week where something like that comes up. And and she'll ask me, no, this is just a listen dilemma. Like, okay, all right, I'll just listen. Like, I can do that. I can sit here and feel with you, but knowing that there's not the intent of giving advice at the end of it. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and maybe that's another action item is to embrace some sort of system like you've got where, okay, so am I supposed to be problem solving or am I supposed to just be listening? I'm guessing most of the time I'm just supposed to be listening, but
I specifically remember the first time that I asked this question because when she said, okay, I have a problem. And because she phrased it that way, I just told her, it's like, okay, I'm male. I have a tendency to solve problems. Is this a problem I'm supposed to be solving? Like, I remember asking her that, and she told me no, I was not. I was very grateful that she told me no, because I would have jumped in immediately and it would not have gone well.
That seems like it would be pretty, it would alleviate a lot of stress too, if you know from the beginning,
right,
that you don't have to have all the answers.
Because then you approach it very differently, I found. Because you end up trying to, like, okay, well, does that affect the way this impacts your thinking? Like, you can ask different questions versus, well, have you considered doing this? Like, you tend to just ask very different questions when you come at it that way.
Yep, that totally makes sense. And I think I definitely need I have some work to do in that area as well. But regarding my specific action item, really what I want to have happen here is I want to see somebody who has not been seen in a while, if that makes sense. Like,
what's the time frame here?
You can hold me accountable to this by the next time that we record. I think that's more than enough time to notice whether it's somebody sitting at a coffee shop alone or whatever. Just finding somebody who you know that they're going through some stuff and just being there, not in order to solve their problems, but just to listen.
So the other side of this, and this is maybe, it's not something she brought up in the book. It's not really, this is just my take on it after having a little bit of time to reflect on the book, is that she's very good at connecting with people. She's excellent at taking Twitter, an email newsletter, a blog, and turning that into real life relationships and conversations. And she's very good at that. My concern with it was that it seemed like, at least in the stories that she shared, like whenever this happened, she would have a moment with people and it would typically stop there. Like there was one moment and that was it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's bad, but she's borderline oversharing. She wants to be seen. I wondered if there was more of the ongoing relationships that were built out of that we weren't seeing. Because it seemed like there was a lot of these one and done type conversations, which don't really lead to any long-term connections and any building of a relationship. It might be a minor point. I don't know, Mike, but it was something that struck me that these seem like very short-lived connection points. And again, those can be positive, especially if, some of the stories involved kids who really looked up to her, and that one moment likely changed their life forever. Like, I totally get that. But at the same time, I wonder how many of those she actually continues to follow up on or can follow up on and thinks it's worthwhile. I don't know. It was just something I thought was interesting.
I completely agree with that. Like, that's something that is a struggle for anybody online, I would argue, because even in the limited success that my book has currently had, very limited success, I've had people who have emailed me directly and said, "Oh, thank you so much for writing this. This completely changed my life." And it's always great to hear that. And Amanda Palmer talks about in this book that there are people who, as soon as you reply, like they want a million other things from you. Like, I've experienced that. And you literally cannot continue at scale to meet every single problem that every single person that you've ever communicated with has. You have to nicely draw a line. And I don't think she really addressed that in this book about how to do that. She kind of shared one specific story where she thought someone was kind of stepping over the line in terms of her accessibility, and she ignored it for a little while, and then turned out that the person wanted to kill themselves, and she felt really bad about it and guilty about it. And I don't think that was 100% necessary. She even said in the book, most problems can be solved if you authentically communicate. I completely agree, but I also think that authentically communicating is clearly laying out the guidelines of the relationship, whether that is you've responded to the person's blog post or you're meeting them every week for coffee. Doesn't matter. Like, you both have to understand what the expectations are. You have to know when you have somebody's phone number, for example, whether you can text them in the middle of the night. And some people are gonna abuse that. Hopefully, I've not abused that with you yet, Joe. I don't think I've texted you at like midnight, but
not yet. I don't know that it would go off even if you did.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing is, yeah, like with the technology that's available, do not disturb, things like that. Obviously, you can kind of override a bunch of that. But I do think that this is kind of a lost art in terms of communication, is outlining these guidelines, because when all you want is to give love, which is what she's really saying in this book, it feels really, really selfish to say, you know what, I can't handle this right now. I gotta go. But you have to do that. Like, if you do not take care of yourself, you've got nothing left to give people. And I would argue that even the people who are closest to you, they matter more than the casual fans and the people who are going to show up at your shows and buy your merchandise and stuff like that. Like, if you're trying to meet all of their needs, and in this particular case, she shared a couple different stories where, like, her relationship with her fiance and then husband was suffering because of that. That's messed up. And I'm not professing to have it all down. I know that there have been times when I have been too busy, I've been too stressed, and the people that suffer from it are the people who are closest to me. So I'm not saying that like I've got it all figured out, but this is something that I think is worth visiting, and I wish she had talked about, is the fact that you do have to have priorities laid out. And again, the word priority, don't really like having multiples there, but you've got to have like a hierarchy in terms of like the things that are most important. And it's got to be the people that you care about the most and yourself. Like, you need to be at the top of that list also. because otherwise you will never be able to meet all of the needs of all the other people. She actually mentions somewhere else in the book, everybody wants something from you and you can't give them what they really want. What you can give them is understanding. I think that was actually something that her husband told her when she was dealing with this sort of thing. But you have to recognize that there are always going to be people that you are going to let down. And so you have to be okay with that. And you basically have to decide who you're going to let down, because you can't say yes to everybody.
Yeah, she even calls out that there's times like she wishes she could connect with each individual person, but there's just too much. Like she's called that out. She called that out a couple times. But at the same time, think about it. Go back to the beginning of the book when she was first starting with her band. At that point, if you sent her an email, well, an email wasn't even around, I think, at that point. But when you would send her a letter or a note, she responded to absolutely every single one of them. Like that's where she started. She would send out to all of them. And whenever the email thing did start off, if you emailed her, she would respond every time. Like that's where she started out, which is interesting because even think about people whenever they're trying to start a new business, they want to go the entrepreneur route. That's what a lot of people give you advice. Say yes to everything. Like that's what they'll tell you. Mm-hmm. And, even as a developer, I can tell you that when I started doing custom development, yep, that's exactly what I did. Said yes to every single project. And now I'm trying to figure out how to get people to help me do the work because I can't do it all. So it's a good problem to have, but it's a thing that people start that way and then eventually it grows to a point where you can't handle that anymore. And she's the prime example of that. That's exactly how it panned out for her. So I just found that it's interesting that, you and I both have action items here for Twitter. It's interesting how she's using Twitter to create connection points. And I think if she was starting on Twitter today without the big following, she would probably do the same thing where she would respond to absolutely everybody who mentioned her on Twitter and grow it that way. That's kind of my feel for how she would approach that and grow it to a point where, you were talking about, people continue to come in whenever you're connecting with people personally. Like it tends to grow that way, as opposed to the big broadcast marketing methods that we see all the time. Like those don't always work, but connecting with people one-on-one really does. That was a big takeaway for me out of this book.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I were to, I don't want to make it sound like I am giving Amanda Palmer life advice, but the title of her book is The Art of Asking. How about asking for a little bit of margin? That's the thought that kept going through my head during this section when she's trying to keep up with all this stuff. And I think that the reason that she has trouble with this is another belief, which I completely disagree with. And this one is just, it's not, it's kind of sad, but she mentions in there that, she kind of goes back and forth. But my takeaway at the end of this was that she basically believes that humankind is generous by default. And I completely disagree with that. I believe that humans are greedy, prideful, they're jerks by default. And as a parent, and this is maybe not the best example, but you don't have to teach your kids how to misbehave. You have to teach them how to behave. Their natural inclination is not to share with their brothers and sisters. Their natural inclination is to take. And I think that she shares a lot of stories, and she's been very vulnerable. She's shown up at people's houses. She's never met them before. And every time she's going into those situations, she shared a couple of them where it's like, I'm not sure if I should be doing this. And if she's thinking that like it's not a real great situation, and she always is like, I can't believe I ever thought that. Like I've completely changed these people's lives. And I basically, when I read those, I was like, you've gotten lucky so far. And I don't think that she really does that anymore. But I definitely do not believe that we are pre-wired towards taking care of other people, and we're pre-wired for goodness and charity. Like I believe that is something that you have to work very hard at. And there's a lot of societal constructs and rules and things like that to kind of keep people in line. But if you were to take away some of those things, then you would have anarchy. You would have people who are just looking out for number one. There might be a few people who would try to, spread the love amongst their tribe or whatever, but it would be completely unsustainable without the parameters that we've kind of all agreed to. Yes, collectively, this is the best way to do it.
You ready for action items?
I believe so. Let me just looking over my notes here. There was actually one other thing. She mentioned the impulse to connect the dots and share is what makes you an artist. I just want to call out that I really liked that phrase because it reminded me of Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, which maybe we should cover at some point, but that was one of the most influential books I've ever read because for a long time, I thought I wasn't creative because I couldn't come up with anything just completely original. And Austin Kleon's book basically gave me the license to be creative by saying that all you're doing when you create is you're connecting these dots in ways that nobody ever has before. It's not like you're getting this thing completely, you're getting inspired by a flash of lightning. You're literally just rearranging the inputs and creating a new output. So that's what I thought of when she read that, but I thought that was really good. She also asked at one point, like, what is your gift to the world? And I think that is a very important question for anybody to answer. Figure out what is the thing that you have to add, and then give that away as much as you can.
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I mean,
I'm
still struggling with that one. I don't think that's something that you ever really 100% from this point forward say, yes, this is the thing. It's going to be different at different seasons of your life, but it is something that you should be conscious of because until you figure out what your gift to the world is, I don't think that you can authentically communicate the love that you have for that person because the advice and the connection that you're going to make, it's going to be, I don't want to say tainted, I don't want to say influenced, I don't know what the right word is, but it is going to be colored a little bit by your perspective. And your perspective, if you haven't landed on what is your gift to give to the world, is going to be a little bit maybe negative because you're going to be frustrated, like you haven't landed on the thing yet. And so I think that once you land on the thing, it's kind of, it's freeing in a sense. Like you have more flexibility, you have more ability to give what is inside of you once you recognize what is in you to give, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I think everybody has something they're creative with. But the trick is admitting that you're creative with it and knowing what to do with it. Like That's not an easy thing to answer, which is why I say that's a hard question.
Definitely.
All right, so the first action
items.
I'm going to transition anyway. The first action item, the only action item I had on this is change up my use of Twitter. I have for a while now seen Twitter as kind of a time suck and not much comes out of it. And I'm realizing I've kind of been thinking about Twitter the wrong way. And I want to use that as an avenue to connect with people more on a one-on-one basis and potentially try to find ways to use that to do these in-person things. Because I think those are really cool. I think there's a lot of potential, at least for me, in that way. So I'm going to try it. We'll see how it goes.
So all these years, you've been doing it wrong.
I think so. Maybe. I'm doing Twitter wrong.
Well, Twitter specifically is interesting for me because that's how I got connected with Asian Efficiency. I think that's probably how I got connected with you and several other people.
Yeah, I think so.
I now have real relationships with. They're not just my internet heroes that my wife rolls my eyes at whenever I reference them. She knows that they are actually real people. But yeah, so Twitter is specifically what I like about it and what's worth calling out here in the podcast, I think, is that Twitter, you choose who you want to follow. They don't have to follow you back. And so you get to pick who you let, in essence, speak into your life. And if someone is going off about something that you don't care about, you don't want to hear it anymore, like you just unfollow them, and there's no harm, no foul. Whereas Facebook, it's a reciprocal relationship. You have to ask to follow somebody or become a friend with somebody, and then they you basically are Facebook friends at that point. And what's ridiculous about Facebook, in my opinion, is that the average person I read has like 500 Facebook friends, but those aren't really your friends. In fact, one statistic I read said that the average American only has like 1 or 2 real friends. And so it's kind of like a placebo, and it's getting back to what you were talking about a while back, where the internet is like these substitute relationships. And I think that Facebook kind of facilitates that. So I always describe Facebook as like the people that you used to know, and Twitter is kind of the people that you want to know. And that's why I prefer Twitter, and I'm never on Facebook.
I don't ever go to Facebook. I get made fun of it for it quite a bit with some of our small group, the people in our small circle here. Yeah, I'm not a Facebook person.
I don't think Amanda really talked about Facebook, but it must have been around, and I'm wondering what her perspective on it would be.
That's a good question. I don't know. Someone had to explain to her Twitter. And it wasn't even a new thing, I think, when she finally joined it. She resisted it, I think she said, for 2 years. And when she finally did get into it, she thought it was a one-way street. She thought everybody shared things, but you couldn't reply to it. So then whenever they showed her that, oh yeah, people can reply to what you post, it was like a gold mine for her. Completely changed things. But I don't know what she would think about Facebook. That would be interesting.
Well, I had that view of Twitter initially too. I remember when I joined Twitter, watching the video and like how it's supposed to work. And it's like, you can post miniature updates and tell people where you're at and things like that. And I'm like, okay. So
Why would I do that?
there's tools out there where you can go back and you can find like your first tweet ever. And mine was like stuffing my face at Chipotle or something like that. And it's just like, why in the world would anybody care about that?
Oh, Chipotle.
But I've grown up on how I use Twitter as well. So that was one of my action items too, was to, I guess, not change up how I use Twitter, but specifically use Twitter to ask for things. I know that there are a bunch of people that follow me on Twitter now, considerably more than a few years ago. And that's because we do stuff like this. I'm host of the Productivity Show, my work at Asian Efficiency, and other stuff on the web. But some of these people, like, I've never actually met them. And they still, what's cool about podcasts is you feel like you know the person, even if you don't have a direct connection to them. And that's why I use the term internet heroes a lot of times when I would describe people like you to my wife, is like, these are people that I really respect. I feel like I know what they think about things, but they have no idea who I am. You know, they would never hang out with me. And I think that asking for things on Twitter is a unique opportunity to create more of those connections. Because what I'll just speak for myself, I guess. What has held me back from asking for things on Twitter previously was been like, well, that's kind of ridiculous to ask for something like that. Like, that's way too big of an ask. But she mentions in the book, the only person who can judge whether a request is fair is the person being asked. So if I'm going to throw something out there on Twitter, and somebody who has bought my book and listens to every podcast I do, and they've followed some of the advice that I've given, and it's really helped them out, like they want to reciprocate in some way, shape, or form, then why not give them the opportunity to do that?
Because then you're just getting in the way. Like, you're not letting people step in where they may want to.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's obviously a lot of back and forth here. There's a balance that needs to be struck, and I have no idea where that line is. But really, the big takeaway from this book, I think, is that don't be afraid to ask for these things, because the fact that you are asking is giving more opportunities for these authentic connections to be made. And so it's almost like you're depriving people of an opportunity to benefit them by refusing to ask for help.
Makes it very real. I like that.
Yep.
So your other one here is your conversation to listen.
Yep.
Do you have anything else you're adding for action items? Is that it?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dare I ask what you felt about the author's style? I don't know that I should ask this question. All right, here you go, Mike. Author style and rating.
Well, I feel like I've gotten most of it out of my system by now. But
you've aired the dirty laundry.
Yeah. So one of the things that Amanda said in this book is that at the end of the day, we're all broken. And I completely agree with that. The thing that I did not appreciate was the description of the brokenness. And it kind of came across as like, you hear people, sometimes people will get asked, like, if you could do it over, what would you change? And there's always those people who are like, well, I wouldn't change anything because my experiences have made me who I am. Like, that's what I envision Amanda Palmer being like. And it drives me crazy because I admit that my experiences have made me who I am, but I also admit that I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And if I could go back and do them over and not hurt those people, I would absolutely change what I have done. So didn't like her style, didn't like the language, didn't like the comparisons with religion, because I felt like it was completely unfair and didn't understand at all what she was correlating. That being said, I do think that some of her stuff in here, which hopefully, Cranky Mike hasn't been the only one on the podcast, and we've been able to tease out some of the good stuff here as well. I do think there's some value here. I think it's way too long from a bookworm perspective. If it is a biography, that's fair. Like I can't judge it through that lens though, because I would never pick up and read a biography by Amanda Palmer necessarily. Although, now that I think about it, there probably is some value in reading biographies of people who are just on all ends of the spectrum. I think I heard once Jim Rohn say, as you're building out your library, you should have a biography of Gandhi and you should have a biography of Hitler, because you got both ends of the spectrum then as reference points. So that being said, like total rating here, like if I were doing this just on the author style, I'd give it a negative star if I could. But based on the content, I think that there is some redeeming value here. So I'm going to say 2 stars, which I think, as much as I've complained about this book, is pretty generous.
I was completely expecting a 1 or a 0.5 or something. That's really what I was expecting from this.
Well, there's some good stuff in here, but it's not unpacked fully, I think. And then what is unpacked fully is the descriptions of all the stuff that I don't care about. So yeah, but some of the stuff that she says in here and the whole theme of the book, I think is really good. I just wish that she would have spent more time expanding on that. Like one thing that we didn't even talk about here, but she references Brene Brown a couple times. One of the quotes she said, and she credited Brene with this, was the opposite of lack is not abundance. The opposite of not enough is enough. That's awesome. I completely love that, but it was one quote and then she's going on to the next disgusting story. So like, talk about that more.
All right. So I don't think I had near the negative feel that you did, which I think is apparent at this point, but I felt like she's very good at writing. I'll give her that. But at the same time, there's a lot of cases where I wondered, why are you sharing this story? Like, I understand the story. I understand what happened. How does it play into what you're trying to get across? Like, I struggled with that quite a bit. And maybe that's just me not having the artistic mind that she has. I don't know. I don't know what that was. So that was difficult for me. I think whenever it comes to a rating, I found a lot of interesting Like there's a lot of things here that I'll probably use in the back of my mind to connect dots in the future. I won't probably ever explicitly call out where I got them. Just saying. But I think time it's all said and done, I'd put this one at about a 3.5 because I feel like it was worth the read, but I'm not going to recommend it to anyone. So Bookworm listeners, if you're listening to this and you haven't read the book, I don't recommend it. Listen to this. You'll pick up what you need out of here.
Exactly. This is the
right,
the only book we have read where I have gotten angry while reading it. There was The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, which was boring and I almost put it down, but this one legitimately made me mad.
I consider that a success. Okay, you ready to set this one aside? Be done with it? Put it behind you? What's next?
Upcoming books. This is okay. So listen up, readers. We took your recommendations, but I didn't look at how big this recommendation was until I ordered it and it showed up. So the next book is Paid to Think by David Goldsmith, and it is about 600 pages. It is bigger than most of my college textbooks. So while I've started this book and it's really good, I don't think I will be taking another recommendation like this. So I don't know. Do we want to define what qualifies as a recommendation going forward? But I know we're going to shoot for doing this one in the normal time frame, but this is a
big
mammoth book. This is quite the tome.
So I texted Mike whenever this one showed up in my mail, and so here's what I sent Mike. Paid to Think just showed up in my mailbox. This might be a 2-week book instead of one.
This might be a 2-month book. It's so dense. Like, it's really good stuff. I'm not sure if you started it yet, Joe. It's really, really good, and it's very clearly articulated, and maybe it's just the subject matter that I'm so interested in that I'm getting a lot from it. But it's the kind of thing where you read like 5 pages and then you have to stop and think for like a half an hour about what you just read, because they just taught you like an entire semester's worth of systems in those 5 pages. So I'm taking a lot of screenshots and adding it to my MindNode file. I think that is the thing that's keeping me going through this at the pace that I'm currently at, is the fact that I'm creating this reference while I'm doing this, where I'll be able to go back to this over and over again, and it's going to prove really valuable. But just sitting down to read this, like, man, this is a lot of work. So the takeaway here, I guess, or the general guideline in terms of making a recommendation is, if you cannot...
No. We're not putting a guideline down. That's up to us to look into it ahead of time.
Okay. But I'm going to say this, though, that if you want your book to be accepted, like, you fool me once, shame on me. But if you cannot finish the book in, I'm going to say, an hour a day in within the 2-week period, like, I'm probably not going to pick it next time. I'll just say me. Okay. So you go ahead and pick the next 1,000-page textbook that gets submitted. But this was, I'm going to say, this was almost a mistake. I'll hold off reservation until we get to the end, but this is going to be a ton of work.
There's a lot here. I started reading it, and it's what I would call a very dense book. There's a lot of information in a very short time frame. This is a big one. And you're not kidding when you say you have to spend about an hour reading a day on this one. Like, to get this one done for the next one is going to be a challenge.
For sure.
Okay, so I inflicted Mike with pain on Art of Asking. I suppose it's only fitting that he inflicts pain on all of us with Paid to Think.
Unintentional pain. Okay. Reader-suggested pain, or listener-suggested pain.
I'm going to have to go back and figure out who suggested it, and we'll blame them. All right, so following Paid to Think
is another not short book.
No, it's not. It's Anti-Fragile by, what is it, Nicholas Taleb? I don't know how to say it. So it's Anti-Fragile. Again, it's a long one. I don't think that one's as small a print, though. Like, I don't think that one's near as dense. That one won't be as bad as Paid to Think. So thankfully, we're not doing 2 at that level, back to back.
Right. Yeah. Anti-Fragile's one that I've been wanting to read for a long time. So I'm actually excited to go that one as well. For Gap books, I know you've got a not applicable because
I'm not doing a Gap book. Yeah, I'm reading Paid to Think.
Yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and recommend Love is a Killer App by Tim Sanders. I actually read this one already, so it's done. It's not something I'm committing to read in the next week or two. But this book is awesome. And Tim Sanders is the former technical guy or operations guy at Yahoo, I believe. And it's a business book, which is really talking about how you can advance your network and advance your career by developing this mindset of giving stuff away. It's a really interesting perspective, which I think would revolutionize a lot of people, like the way that they do business, and was really refreshing to hear all of his stories and things where he's implemented this in his own life and what's kind of come of it. So it's a really cool read. It's also a very short read. It's very quick. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend that one.
I have that one. It's on my Gap book list at the moment.
Nice. Well, don't read it this time, but definitely read it.
Okay.
In fact, maybe we'll come back and revisit that one for Bookworm at some point.
There we go. So whenever we don't feel like when next time we have a paid to think and we just want to take a break, we'll just do that one instead.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to recommend a book that is not 600 pages and 20 pounds, you can go to bookworm.fm/list and you can see all of the books that are on the schedule. And then there'll also be a button there where you can recommend a book. And obviously we are trying to incorporate more of those into the show, but be warned, dear listener, we are not going to create a sensational amount of work for us for a side project, all the time. Just putting the expectations out there.
We could axe them. We'll axe them. So if you did like The Art of Asking, even though Mike certainly did not, and you wanted to tell Mike how he did it wrong, let us know on iTunes or on the Productivity Guild, either one. Links to both of those in the show notes. Let us know what you thought. I think we're still trying to de-seat, what is it, KCRW? Is that the one that you called out that you got a target on?
Yep. That's right.
So here's our ask, The Art of Asking. Would you please go leave us an iTunes review? They'd really help out. We would appreciate that. Thank you.
We would absolutely appreciate it. We got to figure out some sort of celebration when we finally do unseat KCRW, by the way. And
we'll build your communication room.
There we go. I like it. All right. So if you're following along, we're going to be doing Paid to Think next by David Goldsmith, Anti-Fragile after that. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.